Hi everyone! In today's tutorial we will show you how to create an animated panorama. Animated panoramas are a new type of panorama that we have just added to 3DVista Virtual Tour Pro, which allow you to include small videos into your panoramas. They're different to entire 360-degree videos because we do take a still 360 panoramic image as base or background and then integrate or overlay videos on top of parts of the panorama. This allows us to animate certain areas of the panorama. We will demonstrate three cases. The first is integrating a stock video into a TV that we see inside our panorama. The second is to animate a person inside the panorama that will present to us the museum that we are in. And the third is using a chroma video to integrate into your panorama, which will allow you to integrate just anything smoothly into the scene of your panorama.
If you're interested in one specific case, simply jump to the respective minute now. If you want to understand the differences and get a feeling for the tool, keep watching.
Let's start with a TV example. We open a new project, import our base panorama, the room with the TV, and go to the Panoramas tab, more precisely to the Hotspots sub-tab. We now use this new video hotspot tool, and similar to when you draw a polygon hotspot, we define the hotspot area by drawing it into the panorama here. So let's first zoom in. This is the frame that was on TV when we shot the panorama, and which we want to replace obviously by inserting our video here into the TV, so that there's a moving image playing throughout the whole time that we are in this panorama and it looks like the TV is on. So we select the new video hotspot option, navigate to our video file, and define the area in which the video should go. So we outline the TV by going from corner to corner, or clicking from corner to corner. The jumps that you can see while I outline the TV are valid points that the program calculates based on the equirectangular format of the panorama, so that the flat video can later be accurately projected into the spherical panorama. Let's have a look in the preview. Right. So as you can see, at the beginning we still see our underlying panorama in the defined area, but when we roll over it, the cursor changes into a hand to indicate that we can click. And once we do that, the video starts playing. And of course I can move around the panorama as usual, with the video continuing to play and adapting its projection accordingly. Equally, we could be using other hotspots in the panorama and navigate throughout the panorama as we are used to. The video will always continue to play. Now there are a couple of options for our video. We have the hand icon when we roll over the active area, or this one, which instead of showing the underlying panorama inside the active hotspot area, so in our case that was the frame of what was on TV when we shot the panorama, but instead of that it will show the first frame of the video right away, covering basically what's underneath in the panorama. That does not necessarily mean that the video will start playing automatically. It simply places the first still frame of the video inside the TV by default when we enter the panorama, so we don't ever get to see what's underneath. Next, we have the loop option, which you probably are familiar with from the normal video function inside VT Pro. So should the video play once or repeat in loop. And finally, the setting that determines how and when the video should start and stop playing. On start would be that once we start or enter this panorama, the video starts playing immediately and automatically. On click obviously means that it will not start until the audience clicks on the hotspot. And on rollover will make the video start when the user rolls over the active area with his mouse. And we have the same options for when the video should stop. So should it stop once the video terminates, once it played once? Should it stop when the user clicks on it again, or once the user rolls out of the active area? In our demo here we will leave the hand option activated, the first frame showing, and we want the video to start right away upon entering the panorama, playing in loop up until we leave the panorama. So really as if it was an actual TV playing naturally inside the room. Let's have a look in the preview. As you can see, the video is correctly set. It starts playing automatically and will play in loop until we leave the panorama. We can zoom in and out and navigate through the tour just as we always do. The video will keep playing inside the TV, giving us a little more action and realness in our tour through the house. Now, in our second use case, we want to superpose a video that needs to be projected into the sphere of the panorama. So whereas the other video could remain flat because it was inside of a flat TV, we now need to take an extra step before importing the panorama into VT Pro, where we change the video's projection. As a general rule of thumb, the wider the lens of your camera, the more you probably need to correct its projection. In our example, we took the video with a 360-degree camera, so we have the maximum field of view, which means we definitely need to correct the projection, even though we will only take a small section of the video shot. How do we do that? Let me show you. So here in our second example, we'll now recreate this sample here, which you probably know from our website. This is our panorama with its hotspots and everything, and if we click on this person, we will see how this area comes to life. It gets animated, as in a video will start playing, but only in this area. So we can continue moving around the panorama, clicking on hotspots, the video will continue to play. So what we have here is a video which we recorded and superposed onto the panorama. So the video is a square which we seamlessly placed on top of the panorama in a way that will not let the visitor see any lines or differences between where the video ends and the panorama underneath begins. Again, the difference to our first sample here is that the video we're using is not flat as the one from the TV example before. Instead, let me show you. Our source video has been taken with the same camera as the panorama, and that was a 360-degree camera, the Ricoh Theta V specifically. So first we took the panorama, and then without moving the camera or changing any settings or anything, we took a video which would be this one. And as you can see, it's got the same position and height and all. The colors are slightly different because the panorama was taken in HDR, which you cannot apply for video with this particular camera, so you can tell the difference here, but I'll show you in a minute what you can do to balance this out. So the procedure in this sample is different because the source video we're taking is equirectangular, just like the panorama, but the panorama will be projected into a sphere once we import it into VT Pro, so you will actually see it in 360 in your tour. Projecting a panorama means that lines that you may have seen curved in the flat equirectangular format may now be straightened out. As a consequence, we will have to project the video or the section of the video which we want to use as well, so the lines and projections match with the underlying panorama. So before we can import the video into VT Pro, we need to create a different projection of the video to convert the flat equirectangular video into a normal video, if you will. A video like the ones you would shoot with a standard one-directional camera. We would do this in After Effects, but there are other programs which you can use for this as well. So anything that lets you change from a 360-degree equirectangular video to a flat, normal video where your elements don't show the typical curves and deformations that you get in equirectangular video. Don't worry, this sounds much more complicated than it is. In a minute you'll see the difference in projections and know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's open After Effects. We are using CC, and in this last version of CC, Adobe included tools that let us edit video in the VR format natively, which is very handy. Let's open a new project, include our media, the panorama and the video. Now we take the panorama and create a composition with it. So now we have a composition with the same size as the panorama. And on top of it, we will include our video. Drop it here above the panorama. As you can see, the video is in a slightly smaller format than the panorama, but that we can fix with a right click on the video, transform, and fit to comp. There we go. Both sizes are the same now. The overall deformation is not the exact same in the video as in the panorama, but that shouldn't be an issue because we will only take this small square section of the video here. The next step is to transform the video from equirectangular to a projected version, which is what we need for VT Pro. For that we click on Window and all the way down here on VR Comp Editor, which will pop up this new window here. Now we click on Add 2D Edit, which will pop up yet another window where we select our composition, the one with the video and the panorama behind, and click Add 2D Edit. Let's get this window out of the way. Okay, as you can see, the curves and deformations that we had before in our video have disappeared, and now we have a perspective as we would get with a standard unidirectional camera. Now we can rotate and move the image around with this tool, the Orbit Camera tool, and so we can see the whole 360 degrees, but always projected in a sphere and without deformations. So using this tool, we'll center our object, which is this man here. And now in order to make the video file as small as possible and therefore as fluid and smooth as possible with little loading times, we will go to Composition, Composition Settings, and reduce the size of it to just the tiny square which we need. So let's try with 500 and 500 pixels, for example, or even a little less, until the minimum possible. Now again with the rotation tool, center the object again if necessary. And let's check and make sure that throughout the course of the video, no hands or any movements will be outside of the defined square. Yes, we're all good. Now we only need to adapt the times of the video. This would be the start, so we bring the control forward to this point. And the end would be as soon as we can see that our person here stops moving, which would be here. So hereby we define the range or sequence which we want to export. And then we go to File, Export, and I usually export from the Adobe encoder queue. And in my case here, since I started with an MP4 file as a source file, it will automatically suggest to export the new video in MP4 as well. If you didn't start with an MP4 file as your source file, make sure that you do export it as an MP4 because this is currently the only format that we support for our animated panoramas. So here we can see that our video will be MP4, and another thing we see, and which is important as well, is the H.264 format. Right now, this again is the only format that VT Pro supports for the animated panorama. This is the most common format in video, so most likely your panoramas will have this format anyway. Make sure that you have both export video and export audio ticked. And also it's important to minimize the quality of the video so that it won't be too big of a file. Otherwise it might occur on some devices that once you click on the hotspot, the loading of the video might take a little and the visitor feels like nothing is happening. So the smaller the video file, the faster the video will load inside your panorama. I usually put this down to 2, which significantly reduces quality and therefore size, but is still a decent enough quality for using the video inside your panorama. As you can see, the size of the video went down significantly from 22 to 5 megabytes. If you should see that with these values the video loses too much quality, simply put it up a little bit and try playing around between 2, 3, or 4, keeping in mind always that the smaller the file, the better your animated panorama. Clicking here, I can set where I want the final video to be stored. And now just click play and it'll start exporting the determined squares section of the video in the determined projection format. And with that, we're done with the After Effects part. Now you could theoretically import the panorama into 3DVista VT Pro to create the animated panel. However, in some cases, in ours for example, the colors of the panorama and the video differ quite a bit. Let me show you what it would look like if we glued the square video as it is onto our panorama. In that case, it might look a little bit false, almost like you glued a square image on top of the panorama, and you would be able to tell the difference between the video square and the panorama background quite clearly, and that's obviously something we want to avoid. Again, this is because the camera we used supported HDR for photo but not for video. To see the difference and to balance it, we'd go and open the compositions that were created along the way, back to the first one where we have our video and our panorama beneath, so you can see the difference. Therefore, we will mask our video to simulate what it would look like if we superposed the video onto the panorama, which is what we would do in VT Pro. It would look something like this, and you can see the cut would show quite clearly. So our goal now is to equalize the video with the panorama that we will have behind. Let me first reduce the opacity a little bit so I can see whether the video and the panorama behind do actually overlay perfectly, and if necessary, move it a little bit so they match. Especially the background and around the edges of the square, things should overlay as well as possible, so that's why we should focus on when trying to match the two. Right, now we almost don't have any cuts. Set the opacity back to 100%. Now instead of a square mask, let me make a circular one. Here's our masks, and let's delete the square one to just work with the new circular one. And to further decrease the apparent lines, see, we can still tell the difference between the video and the panorama. So to further decrease the lines, we give our mask a little bit of feather, 20 for example, which will mask the transitions even more, or 30 even. Getting closer. Now, a final step to perfect matching would be to adapt the colors and luminosity of the video, so it is more similar to the panorama. Therefore, we go to Effect and Color Correction. Now, these values obviously depend on your video, so just try playing around a little bit with them. For my video here, I'll click Shadow Highlight, untick the auto, and put some values that I think would make it look better, say 30 and 10. And see, it adapts a little bit better already. Let's give it a little bit more saturation And this I do because usually the photos that you might take are in HDR or in better quality than the video, and so the video generally tends to look worse, so we give it some more saturation manually. Good. Now the difference between the panorama and the video is much less noticeable. Now we go to the composition that we had with the smaller square and simply export like I showed before. Now that we have our video cutout optimized in colors, etc. to match the panorama, let's get to the VT Pro part to create our animated panorama. So this is 3DVista Virtual Tour Pro or VT Pro, and we create a new project. We import the panorama, double click on it, and we go to the Hotspot subtab. Now we need to include our video in a way that overlays the corners of the video exactly with the respective spots inside the panorama, so you cannot see any lines and won't notice the overlay. Therefore, we click on this new tool here, which is the video hotspot. Select the video square that we just exported and define the area by drawing a polygon, just as you might know it from the polygon hotspot. So click in order to set the point, and this way define the area in which the video should go. While drawing, you may notice that the corners automatically go to all possible projection points, which is because the program calculates the possible projections in real time and therefore offers you the possible points. While doing this, maybe it's useful to have the video as a reference and this way see where we'd need to make some adjustments until we have it matched as perfectly as possible. Tick this box so that right at start we will have the first frame of the video shown, and click preview. And as you can see, the video is on top, but there are still some misalignments because we did not define the polygon area quite as well as we should have. So now it's a matter of making small touch-ups, comparing the final results with our editor. So via adjusting and preview, get closer to a perfect overlay. That might be tedious in some cases, but you'll get there. If this is too complicated, there's a little trick to define the polygon perfectly right away. Let me show you. Open After Effects with the project where we have our video, and in this composition we create a new solid in white, yes, and we will create a mask of the same size as the solid. Therefore we double click on here on the rectangle tool. See, this just created a new mask. We invert that and we reduce it slightly. And that just gave us a small frame which will serve as a guideline. Now we go to this composition which has been created automatically, and here you can see our guiding frame. And this guide will now help us to draw or outline the hotspot polygon exactly where it needs to be. So the next step is to import this panorama with the guideline and replace the one we have in VT Pro in our tour with it. Therefore, we click on Composition, and save frame as File. Paying close attention to that this setting right here is on full. If it is on half, then the exported panorama would be half as big as it should be. And instead of as Photoshop, we want to export it as a JPEG or PNG, which are the two formats that a panorama should have in order to be imported into VT Pro. And here I'll define where it should be stored. And finally click Render, and now it's exported. Then we go back to our VT Pro and our project, open the panorama, and in Settings we replace the current panorama with our guideline panorama. And now we see the outline. Go to Hotspot and adapt the corners of your polygon. In some cases you may see that you cannot exactly move the point to where you want it. That is again because the software calculates in real time the possible projection combinations, offering you what it estimates would be a suitable point. Therefore, in some cases it might be easier to just start drawing the polygon from scratch, right on top of the guiding frame. Then we go back to Settings and replace the provisional guideline panorama with the actual panorama from before again. Click Preview. And now we see that the video is positioned and overlaid perfectly. No lines, no one can tell that there is a video patch on top of the panorama. There's a new feature which we implemented for this called blending. In order to see how this can help us, let's have a look at this sample here. We placed the video patch well, and still we can see the lines pretty clearly. Now with the blending option we can blur out the lines and make the video blend into the panorama. Let's set it to 0.3 for example and see how this changes the sample. See, now the lines are much more blended and the transitions are not noticeable anymore. I'll try and show you in an even more extreme example. Place another video. Leave the blending as it is first and see how the cut is sharp and the lines apparent. Whereas when we increase the blending, you'll see the effect of how the edges blur into the scene. This way, it is much easier to make the videos blend into the scene even without having to touch the color of the video as explained before, as now the blending will mask the differences in color significantly better. So this is how you would proceed if you need to make a video fit into the panorama so that lines inside your video match with lines in the panorama. This is different to the TV example before because in the TV we do not need to make the video content match what's outside of the TV. It'll just be a flat TV playing a video. There's no wooden bar that is half video, half panorama, if you know what I mean. Generally, the bigger the video area inside the panorama, the more you will have to work on the projection of your video to make it match the projection that your panorama applies when being used in VT Pro. Now, the third case is a newly implemented feature, so new in fact that it wasn't there when we shot the first two samples from before. And it's the implementation of a video with chroma. This gives us so many possibilities because it doesn't require us to have recorded a video where we took the panorama. Instead, we can take any video recorded with a green screen or a blue screen and implement it into our panorama where the green or blue parts will become transparent. This allows us to bring elements recorded in front of a green screen or a blue screen into our panorama. You may know this technique from the movies where they work with a lot of green screens. What's cool about this is, among other things, it allows us to include computer-generated elements created in 3D programs into our actual panoramas. Plus, you can find endless videos and resources already created in the internet, which you can take and use in your virtual tours. That's exactly what we will do in this sample. We downloaded these chicken from the internet, and as you can see, they have a uniform green background called the green screen. Once we import them into our panorama, we will be able to make the green disappear so that the chickens smoothly blend into the surroundings. So let's integrate them into the panorama. Again, we use the same tool, the video hotspot. The good news is in the chroma video is that, as opposed to the second sample before, we do not have to be precise at all with the polygon because the background will be transparent, so no matter whether we place the polygon here or here or here, it would work. Let me untick this option, tick play as a loop, and most importantly tick apply chroma. Click Edit Chroma, and first you need to select the predominant color that should become transparent. So we just select the green in our video here. For it to become transparent, we need to adjust this control here until the green disappears. A little bit more. See, here some green parts are already gone, but we need something more like this, that the background is completely transparent. Save, and before trying it out, let's change this so that the video will start playing right at the start of the panorama, and click preview. There's our chickens with a transparent background. But if you look closely, there's still some green parts visible, which is not nice and makes it look a little bit artificial still. To fix this, go back to Edit Chroma and adjust this second control, Smoothing, which smooths out the edges or the lines of what we defined as transparent. And voila! It does look much better. The green has disappeared and the video is well immersed. Let's try with a slightly more complicated video even, like this one where we have transparent areas which would require us to adjust the settings a little more carefully. So we add the video hotspot and select the video file. Define the area, say here. And we untick the first frame, tick the loop, play the video at start, and tick the chroma. Again, select the green just like before, and in this case we need to adjust the values more carefully. So this way you can see that even with a more complex video or animation, it would integrate realistically into the panorama and we'd get a good result. Let's preview. And see, even with complicated, partly see-through areas of dust, it blends in well. Thanks for watching.